you for joining our free webinar today on a very interesting topic surrounding the cannabis industry on the recently released AOAC method for metals in cannabis. Today, we're going to be hosting this webinar with a few authors of this method, Jenny Nelson and Craig Jones from Agilent, and Sam Heckle and Leanne Anderson from CEM. I'm Tracy Surzan, the president of Perry Johnson Laboratory Accreditation, and I'm going to be, again, we're hosting this webinar particularly, but I will be supporting our presenters today and helping out with some questions and answer sessions at the end. So thank you for joining. Next slide. Next slide, Jenny.
There we go. You got that, Tracy?
Thank you. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about, like I said earlier, a fairly new method, AOAC 202103 for heavy metals, for cadmium, arsenic, lead, and mercury, and some additional elements that was just, again, created for the cannabis industry, which is great to hear. You know, for years, we've been ourselves have been accrediting laboratories, and so much rigor goes into it because many laboratories have to develop their own in-house testing methods, and it comes along with a lot of validations and a lot of work. So the more test methods that we have available, the better for this industry. So again, we have Agilent and CEM that will be here today, primarily going over this test method and the challenges and all the research and studies that they had to do to create this method. And then we're going to have some time for question and answers at the end. Next slide. So I just wanted to pull up this particular slide, that anytime we hear about a new method being developed, just want to remind everyone on the call today that where there are national standardized methods, in accordance to 17025 7.2, laboratories should use them unless they have a good reason for not doing so. So this section covers, again, you know, verification and validation of methods. There it talks about that methods shall be appropriate for what you're testing. They should be up to date and available, and they should use the latest version. And again, it's recommended in the standard to use nationally standardized methods like AOAC methods. We still do accept in-house developed methods when there's a reason to use them. But again, you know, why not utilize a national standardized method that's already available? It will decrease your time for validations and, you know, overall give you that assurance and consistency amongst all the other labs in the industry. Next slide. So again, like I just said, laboratories are required to use nationally standardized, recognized methods. Again, it's going to give an equal playing field between all the labs. You're going to get consistent and reliable results. And, you know, what we see happening is many states will recognize that there are standardized methods that are available, and they're going to want you to use them. They're going to want to see them on your scope of accreditation. They possibly want to do less work with reviewing your data packages. So we recommend after the webinar today, please take a look at the new methods. We need to start seeing laboratories move over to standardized methods, again, for the overall consistency in the industry. Next slide. Just some webinar housekeeping for today. This webinar is being recorded. If you can't stay the whole time, or you maybe have other staff in your organization that might miss it today, it will be available on our website for download. Right now, if you've noticed, all attendees are muted, but you do have the option to use the question toolbar, which should be on your far right. And I recommend, because we jump right into questions at the end, that you please type in your questions as you're thinking about things, and you know, we'll be sure to try to answer those. Next slide. Okay, so what I'd like to do here are the presenters for today. So we have Jenny Nelson and Craig Jones from Agilent, and Sam Heckle and Leanne Anderson from CEM. So I'm really happy to to have all of these panelists today. And instead of reading off bios, what I'd like to do is ask that we start with Agilent and have Jenny Nelson and then Craig. If you can introduce yourself to everyone, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. So hi, everyone. My name is Jenny Nelson, and I'm an application scientist for Agilent Technologies. I specialize in ICP-MS and ICP-MS-MS. And I started with Agilent in about 2012, and I am also an adjunct professor at UC Davis. And I've been working in the cannabis space, working on method development and applications for a number of years. Gosh, Craig might know better than I do, but I want to say this is going on like 6 years or so. So I'll pass it over to you, Craig, and you can introduce yourself.
Thank you, Jenny, and thank you for being here. I've been with Agilent since 2004, and as Jenny, I'm also an ICP-MS and MS-MS application scientist. So my background was environmental before this, and yeah, I can't remember how long we've been doing this for so long. I think it is about 6 or 7 years that we've been working on this particular project. So it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of hard work, and we really hope you enjoy the presentation today.
Okay, great.
Hello,
Let's
everyone.
go over. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sam.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sam Heckle. I'm an applications chemist with CM Corporation. I've been with CM for about 6 years now, and I'm a digestion expert. I work on developing digestion methods for different sample types, and I work to digest all of the different cannabis samples for our AOAC method and ASTM methods. So I am the go-to for all the digestion questions. All right, and Leanne, do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. I'm Leanne Anderson, also with CEM Corporation. I work in marketing, technical marketing. So I work with Sam and the team and a couple of other divisions. And I work on big projects like this where I help organize the testing, and then also work with Jenny and Craig to write our methods up. So nice. Thanks for everyone for being here today.
Okay, great. What a good panel. So I think what we're going to do is go ahead and lead off there with Jenny. I think everyone's going to have a little time to talk with some slides. So go ahead, Jenny. I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. So yeah, that's exactly what we're going to do today. We're going to go through kind of our AOAC method and a little bit about the background. And then I'll hand it over to Sam to go into the microwave digestion, the sample prep portion. And then I'll continue talking a little bit more about the method, the ICP-MS side. And then we're going to switch to more of an open discussion, like Q&A format on the method, and actually things that we hear from our cannabis labs. And Craig is going to answer a lot of those, and Sam as well. So that's kind of what we have in store for you today. So let's start by first showing you this AOAC first action method for those of you that have not seen or heard of this yet. So AOAC is an organization that works on new method development and new methods for the community and the different industries that it works with. And so for this specific method, we worked with the CASP panel, and that's a fairly newly created panel within AOAC. I would say that's a few years old at this point. And within the CASP, which is the cannabis group, there are different ERPs, and those are expert review panels. And those expert review panels, they work to develop different SMPRs. And those are standard method performance requirements. And so what they do is they determine what performance requirements different methods need to meet. And for the metals, they set out all this different criteria. They publish it to their website, and they have a call for methods. And so they ask the community, is there anybody out there that has a method that will meet the performance requirements that these experts set? And so that's kind of where this all started and where we got involved. So about 2 years ago, they did this call for methods, and we reached out to CEM, to Sam and Leanne, and we said, hey, we've been working on cannabis for a number of years now. We have methods, and we would love to help get these methods out to the community. And so at the time, we didn't realize how long it would take and how much work it would be. But I think now we can all say we're glad we did it. But we worked with this ERP, this expert review panel for the metals group for over a year. I would say going on closer to 2 years. And what we did is we had to go through almost like a validation with our method, and we did a single lab validation, and that's how we were able to get this first action status. And this was granted to us at the end of last year. You can see this was posted in November 2021, and we now have 2 years to complete a full multi-lab validation. And the group here, Craig, myself, Sam, and Leanne, we've already gotten started on the first steps of working on that multi-lab validation so that we can get final action status for our metals in Cannabis Method. So that's great. Again, a lot of work to do all this. But what I wanted to show you is that if you go to the AOAC website, you can actually click. If you go to this announcement, for example, you can see the OMA number for our method, which is OMA 2021.3. And if you click on that, or you go right to the online methods, you'll get to the official methods of analysis part of the website for AOAC. And you're able to download our heavy metals in Cannabis Method. And you can see here that you have to log in and stuff to access the method, but it is available for everybody. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure the exact cost or how you do that, since I'm already a member. But you just have to log in, and there's I believe a small fee for downloading our method. So at this point, our method is an AOAC method. So Craig or Sam or Leanne or I were not able to actually share the method with you. It goes all through AOAC, but this is how you would access that. So it's all available online. Okay. The next thing we wanted to do was kind of share the current regulations. And again, these are always changing and being updated. So if you do catch one on here that's a little bit different, you can let us know and we'll update our slide. But you can see how there's a lot of different regulations across the US for cannabis and cannabis-related products. And we're always trying to keep up to date with all of these. And it's quite a task. And we want our method to be able to meet all the different requirements of all the different states. And we're also trying to be forward-thinking and think of what are we seeing and what elements are maybe going to come up in the future as well. And for those of you that have been on a lot of webinars or in this space for a while, you can see that there's a lot of talk about adding additional elements. And so we've been thinking about that as well. And our method includes more than just the big four. We have all the additional elements as well. And at this point, I could probably mention that these additional elements were actually in the SMPR for AOAC. They said, we need the big four, but here's a list of additional elements that would be nice too. And just so everybody knows, our method does cover those additional elements. So you can see here that would be chromium, barium, silver, selenium, antimony, copper, nickel, and zinc. So those are also included. Okay. We wanted to highlight, again, these changes and things that we're seeing in the industry. And one of those is Michigan. And you can see in Michigan, there is regulations for inorganic arsenic. And this is one that was a little bit surprising to us, and one that we actually haven't even started working on yet. So you can see there's still a lot more to do in this space. So our method right now only measures total arsenic and not inorganic arsenic. To do inorganic arsenic, we would need to do speciation analysis. And that's something that Craig and I have been actively talking about in the lab and gonna probably tackle here soon in a little bit. So this is, again, a spotlight on one of those states that, new things are coming up all the time, and we're just trying to stay on top of it and have a method that's for the whole community across the US and Canada. Okay, so now into what samples we actually ran for our AOAC study. So when we were working with the expert review panel for the CAS group at AOAC, At first, we were just going to look at some cannabis samples or cannabis plant samples, but they wanted a method that covered more matrices, and they broke things down to us, and they said there's pretty much 4 different categories that we needed to be able to cover with our method, and that was topical, oral, inhaled, and manufactured products. And so after working with the ERP, we came up with a suitable list of different samples that we were going to measure with our method, and kind of check all those different boxes. And so I'm going to go through with you all the different samples that we worked with for this method. So like I said, there was the different categories. The first category was the oral. You can see that we had different pills and capsules. We had tinctures and edibles. And edibles was quite an undertaking because you have to consider that there's a huge variety of matrices when you're looking at edible cannabis products. So there's things with high fat and high protein and high carbohydrates and different variations of all the food triangle of those 3. So we wanted to make sure we had things in different parts of that triangle. Next was topical. So we looked at different lotions and oils and soaps and patches. And then we also had obviously our inhaled products. So that would be our plant material. We looked at Vape Pen oil and different shatters. And then for manufactured products, Sam can probably attest to this, but this was probably one of the more difficult categories that we had to digest, and Sam will talk more about that. But the different types that we looked at for manufactured products was different biomasses, different crude extracts, and then refined extracts. Okay, so those are the different samples that we looked at. And so now I'm going to pass it over to Sam, and he's going to explain the different sample preparation, what he did and what they did at CEM before sending the samples to us to do ICP-MS analysis. You want to take it away, Sam? And just tell me when to move slide.
Okay, thanks, Jenny. So yeah, just to answer your question, the concentrates were definitely the toughest samples to digest out of all of them. They needed every bit of 210 degrees Celsius to get completely digested. And we actually included a little caveat in our method where you can add 1 milliliter of hydrogen peroxide if you're still having difficulties digesting those concentrates. But we didn't have any extra difficulties where we needed to include that in our method. So without further ado, we use the Mars 6 digester. That's the microwave that everyone is probably most familiar with here. That's what we use for our digestions. We used, sorry, go back, please. So we used the high wave sensor technology. That's the newest technology we have that allows us to read temperature without the need for a fiber optic. It's completely touchless, see-through. We can see through the vessels and see the temperature. It allows us to do a little bit more than we could before, and we're able to use better vessels that we weren't able to use previously, a better technology. So for this, we have a pre-programmed one-touch method labeled Cannabis that goes to 210 degrees, and it is found on the microwave. You just press one button and it can tell what type of vessels you put in there, and it knows how much power to use and everything on its own. So you just press the Cannabis button and hit go. The type of vessels we use specifically for this application were the Express Plus vessels. They're 110 mil volume TFM Teflon vessels. They're really easy to assemble. They're only 3 pieces, a liner that you put your sample and acid in, and then the plug and the cap that go on top to seal it up. And then you place that vessel in a turntable, and then you place the turntable into the microwave and hit go. So that's what we used equipment-wise for this. If you could hit next, Jenny. All right, so let's get to the actual method, the digestion sample prep method. We had to stick with the 0.5 gram sample size for this. At least that was the minimum requirement for some of the states in this study. So California, I know for sure, required at least a 0.5 gram sample size. And it helps to use a 0.5 gram because you get a more homogeneous sample if you're using a larger sample size. So 0.5 gram is what we decided to go with. And we added 9 mils of nitric and 1 mil of HCl. So the HCl was added specifically for mercury to help stabilize mercury in this case. And the nitric is really what's doing the oxidation here. But 9 and 1, you can use as little as 5 mils if you need to. But that's the general ratio of acids we used. And again, we used the Cannabis one-touch method that was already on the Mars 6. It made it really simple. We digested it at 210 degrees for about a 15-minute hold, and that is enough to sufficiently, destroy all of the carbon and, get a good digestion. Afterwards, we diluted our samples up to weight. I think we went with 50 mil final dilution, or 50 gram final dilution weight. And after that, they're ready to be analyzed. They should be a clear and colorless, particle-free digestion. Some of the plant materials, though, will have particle silicates left behind. That really wasn't an issue, and it wasn't that much anyway, so not a big deal. But yeah, that's the gist of what we did from the digestion standpoint of our method. All right, that's it.
Thank you, Sam.
No problem.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, and one thing that I would like to say is that Sam shipped all the digested samples over to us in Santa Clara, California, and that's where Craig and I share a lab. And we were able to run all of the samples that Sam, and these are like hundreds, if not thousands of samples that Sam shipped to us to run. And we ran them all straight. So Craig and I didn't do any further dilutions to any of the samples that Sam shipped over to us. And that was because that we used the UHMI setup on our 7850 ICP-MS. So you can see here we have a picture of the single quad ICP-MS system that we did use for this entire study. And but just so that you know, you can use triple quads as well. And this is one question that we have gotten before. And you can just run your triple quad in a single quad mode if you'd like to use our method. So it's no problem at all. So, but this is the instrument that we use to run all of our cannabis studies. So we also used an SPS4 auto sampler, and we used basically the standard setup. We used a micromist concentric nebulizer. We used just a regular quartz spray chamber and our regular 2.5 millimeter ID quartz torch. We also used nickel plated platinum tip sampler cones. And of course, we used KED mode using helium in our collision reaction cell. So a very basic normal setup. There wasn't anything that was, a specialty item or anything that you needed to purchase to run this method. It was just a standard ICP-MS setup for our Agilent 7850. Okay, so because we use that UHMI setup, and that allows us to control a lot of different matrices that are going into the instrument, we had really good internal standard recovery, and that's basically what this slide is showing you here. So this is a run that lasted almost 24 hours, and this was running a lot of those samples that Sam sent over. And you can see we have really good recovery across the board for this almost 24 hours. And Craig and I, like, days and days and days of running. This is what we see routinely and what we expect everybody to see in their lab. Okay, here's an example of some CCVs, so calibration, a continuation calibration verification, recoveries over the course of some long runs. You can see all the elements here. And here's some example calibration curves for the big four. So this is showing you calibration curves for arsenic, cadmium, lead, and mercury. And yeah, we'd never see any issues with the big four or additional elements in our method as well. And you can see here some of those additional optional elements. You can see here we've listed vanadium, chromium, manganese, cobalt, and nickel for this one. All right, so we didn't want to get into all the data for this method because we have tons and tons of slides where we can show all the spike recoveries, all the SRM recovery data. We have a lot of that data, but that's just a lot of tables on the screen. So we didn't want to bore everybody with going through all the different tables of data, but we welcome you to download our method, and actually all the data is present in the method. So if you want to take a closer look at anything, you're more than able to do that by just getting hold of our method from AOAC. Okay, some things that we did want to point out that we used with our method was, first, we used a half mass correction, and that's where we're able to get around some polyatomic interferences or some interferences that we have on some of those elements of interest. And so one of the main ones that we have seen in the cannabis industry, and it's pretty common, I guess, in a lot of food samples as well, is rare earth elements. And that's an issue because let me see if my next slide goes into this. Yeah. You can see that we have these rare earth elements, one of them being samarium, and that has an isotope at 150. And if that is doubly charged, which can happen, you would have 150 over 2, and that would equal 75. And this would interfere with arsenic, and that is one of our big 4 elements. And we do see rare earth elements in cannabis samples. And this should not be surprising to anybody because a lot of cannabis is grown in the ground, and that soil, depending on where your cannabis is grown, it can contain rare earth elements. And those rare earth elements are uptaken by the plant, and they can be present in the sample. And so we need to have these tools in order to work around possible interferences for the different elements that we need to measure. Okay, so with our new software, we make it very easy, and you can just click on that you want a rare earth element correction applied to the method, and it's done automatically for you. And this is actually what Craig and I did use. So if you have one of our instruments and you want our method, we're able to share our batch templates with you. And so this is all set up for you. But if this is something you want to set up on your own, you can do it automatically in the software. Here's another example of where a doubly charged interference would be an issue. And you can see on the screen here, we're highlighting zinc and barium. And you can see if barium is doubly charged, that would cause an interference on zinc. And you can see here, we're looking at barium in a cannabis flower, and we're showing you on the left-hand side of the screen, the isotopic template that shows really nicely that all the different isotopes of barium are present in this cannabis flower sample. And if that is the case, and we're looking at zinc, there could potentially be an interference. And that's why we are using this half mass correction and correction equations for zinc at 66. The other examples of that would be selenium and arsenic. And so you can see here where we see rare earth elements again. This is a cannabis plant that Craig and I ran in California. And you can see that clearly the isotopic templates overlay very well for a lot of those different rare earth elements listed. And again, that would cause an interference on arsenic and selenium. And so we want to make sure that people aren't blind to this and aren't unaware that this can be an issue. And that's why we want to share this. And this is taken into account in our AOAC method. Okay, so again, for arsenic and selenium, these have already been pre-thought out, and we're already taking this into account, and it's already accounted for in our method. Okay, another tool that we like to use, again, is this isotopic template tool. And a lot of times we like to use this because we want confirmation that different elements are in the sample. And you can see this is a spectrum soft gel, and you can see if there's mercury and lead present, that's a big deal. We want to confirm that those really are there. So if you use this isotopic template and overlay the relative isotopic abundances of each of those elements, and you get a good match, then you can be fairly certain and fairly confident on the data that you're reporting. Okay, so we wanted to share that as well. Also, we wanted to share that we've also been working not only with AOAC, but we've been working with ASTM. And we've been working on ASTM to get a cannabis method out as well. And that has already gone through, let me go to the next screen, that has already gone through balloting, and we're working on all the edits and corrections right now that we've received from the ASTM community. And hopefully very soon, and then I would say in the next week or so, we will be able to submit all of our corrections and get this back out to the community for more input. So we hope that folks will, if you're interested, join the ASTM Cannabis D37 community and provide input if you have any, or just feel free to comment on our method as well. So we are very active. We're working really hard, all 4 of us, to really help with the community and make it easier for the labs that need to run metals and cannabis and deal with all these regulations and changes in regulations and things that your customers and folks would like to see. So I think at this point, that's kind of like a real quick overview of our method. Again, if you want more details, please please download our method and go through anything in detail that you would like, and please reach out to all 4 of us if you want any more information. But that's kind of what we wanted to share with you today, and we wanted to have time to kind of share with you a lot of the different issues and questions that we get from cannabis labs that are maybe just thinking about starting up to run cannabis, or working on maybe their accreditation and stuff like that. So I'm going to actually hand this over now to my colleague Craig, and Craig has, he's been doing this for a long time and been in many cannabis labs setting up ICP-MS methods. So Craig, I'm going to hand it over to you, and you can share all your experiences and all the different questions that you get, and especially the ones that you get from labs that are working on their accreditation.
Sure thing, Jenny, and thanks so much for all that information. And I think this top question, this is probably the biggest one, because, when you do cannabis analysis, you're not just doing, the big 4 elements. We're doing a multitude of elements, as Jenny showed, and those are constantly changing. But a lot of the, I don't want to say a lot of cannabis labs that are starting up with their LC and GC methods, to find a blank, a type of sample that doesn't contain, whether it be a pesticide or herbicide or whatever type of test they're doing, that's fairly common. But for metals analysis, you're not going to find a plant sample or a soil sample, or even the final products that don't contain some level of metals in them. So as it goes for EPA methodologies, what you're looking at when you're looking at a method blank is really only the reagents that you're using. So that's going to be the acids, and that's going to be the water that you're going to use. So that needs to go through a digestion process, and then that's where you're going to determine what your detection limits are, and ultimately determine what your limit of quantitation are. So I get a lot of labs that struggle with that, depending on who they're working with, to try to get things going. And I think it's very important to understand that don't kill yourself trying to find a cannabis sample that's going to be blank, because it's not going to happen. So that's probably one of the biggest ones. And with the digestion question on here, I'm actually going to pass that to Sam, since he is the expert on this. Because I think this is very important as well. So we get this question a lot.
Sure. So can I prepare my cannabis samples on a hot plot, or is a microwave digestion system required? And the answer to that is pretty much straightforward. You need a closed vessel microwave digestion system for a couple of different reasons. The most important reason would be that you don't want to lose your volatile elements, right? So your arsenic, your selenium, your mercury. If you're on a hot block, you could potentially lose those to the atmosphere whenever you're boiling off. So that's not something that you want to have to fight with. That's why we prefer to do a closed, pressurized vessel. And then also, it's really hard to, honestly, without atmospheric pressure, you can't reach on a hot block 210 C with just nitric. You have to add a little sulfuric, and then you're not getting your lead recovery. So, in order to achieve this 210 degrees Celsius, you have to use a pressurized vessel to get to those types of temperatures needed to digest the cannabis samples. So yes, a microwave is very much necessary. All right, I think that's it for this slide. A couple more of the microwave questions. So can I digest my cannabis samples at temperatures lower than 210 C, for example, 190 C? We get this question a lot, and it's pretty much no. So 210 C, as we stated earlier, some of the concentrate samples, they're a lot tougher to digest, and so, honestly, a lot of the high fat foods and stuff like high sugar foods will be harder to digest as well. So 210 C is pretty much necessary for a lot of these samples. And if you're doing a mixed batch, you're going to have to go to the temperature required for your toughest samples. The other samples will digest at that temperature as well. So if you go to 190, you're not going to get a complete digestion on your oils and concentrates. So you must go to 210 C. The second question here, what's the least amount of acid I can use to digest a cannabis sample? We get that question a lot too, not just for cannabis, a lot of different fields. You're trying to minimize the acid concentration going into your ICP, right? That's what we're all trying to do. So the minimum that we allow you to use in our vessels is 5 mils, and that's because we need at least 5 mils to completely digest the sample. Some of the acid is going to be consumed during the reaction, and without 5 mils, you'll notice you're not going to get as clear and colorless of a digestion. It'll be a little yellow, maybe a few particles left behind. So 5 mils is really the minimum that you need to have in order to reach that. And that's acid volume. You can't use 3 mils of acid and 2 mils of water because water won't do the trick. It's not going to oxidize like the acid will. And so, yeah, definitely 5 mils minimum acid volume. That's pretty much necessary. So that's it for that question.
So I think at this point, those were things that have come up, but Tracy had some additional questions, I think, that she was going to ask or bring up that she received from her folks. Is that right, Tracy? And then Craig was going to answer those.
Yeah, that's right. So I have a few questions here. I'm just going to check over on this question bar. Feel free, anyone in the audience, if you'd like to type in any type of question. It's okay now. I do have some questions we're going to address first. Okay, so just a couple questions. How difficult with this new method, if a laboratory is currently using their own in-house internal method, how difficult is it for them to transition to your method?
So I'll take that. It's not. It depends on the type of analysis that we're doing, but this equates to a well-established EPA type methodology. So I would use this same method as far as the ICP-MS goes that I would have used for an EPA analysis, because we're doing a lot of the same type of things. It's plant materials, it's soils, if you're doing the media, the things that the plants are actually being grown in. And then, the food lab is the same thing. So it's not hard to transition. And on the 7850, as Jenny mentioned, we really didn't do anything special. So it's not like we had to change anything on the front end. So we could transition from water analysis to these high matrix digests with no problem whatsoever. So it's very simple, and that's what we're here for too. So the team at Agilent and the team at CEM, we're here to support you, so that if any little additions that you need to make, we certainly are here to make those suggestions and assist you in any way we can.
Okay, great. Another question too is just in general, and this might not have anything necessarily to do with just metals, but just even from us from the accreditation perspective, we hear a lot, the variance between laboratories with the results, and we all hear that, how are they getting this, how is this happening? So, maybe this is more for Sam or Agilent. What do you see when the sample prep is just not done correctly, how it affects the overall results? I'm sure you have to support your laboratories to maybe help them maybe answer why. So I don't know if this is a better question for CEM or for Agilent, but we know sometimes that could be something that could impact for sure the actual overall result.
Do you want?
Yeah,
I'll chime in if Jenny or Craig. You go ahead and take this. Honestly,
go ahead. No,
okay.
Well, I mean, it's both of us, right? So you start.
Right,
Yeah.
it really is. All right, so I'll start it off. So yeah, if you get incomplete digestion, you're gonna have particles and undissolved carbon, right? So residual carbon will be kind of high. And I know, I'm sure Craig can attest to this. They probably see like a interference, maybe a little higher recoveries on arsenic and maybe some other elements whenever they don't have that carbon completely digested. And also, I'm sure they can clog up their nebulizers or stuff like that. So, we want to try to reduce the amount of particles that are left over afterwards. And that's just, what we're trying to do with getting a complete digestion. So you want to talk more on it, Craig?
That's exactly right. Yeah, Sam. And, while we have a very robust nebulizer, and with the utilization of our high matrix interface that Jenny mentioned, if particulates make it in there, the plasma maintains, its ionization efficiency, so which is actually unique to us. But then that other factor of the carbon is there is an enhancement, and that affects things like arsenic, selenium, beryllium, multiple elements where you might see an elevated response, and so you're going to see that false positive. So, and I think, stepping back to, Sam's questions, the other thing is we showed that, we basically built the batch on the ICP-MS and we just ran the samples. I mean, it was very straightforward. But I always equate these types of analysis to cooking, where it's very important to have good cookware. You want to cook everything right. But if you don't prep things correctly in the front end, then you're only going to get, the results, you're only going to get a bad taste in your mouth, right? So the sample prep is so important, and CM just did such a great job on this, because that's where everything starts. The instrument's only going to tell you how good you did on the front end. So it's very important to maintain and follow those guidelines.
Okay, great. We have a question here. Another one just popped in. After digestion, how long are the samples good for, and under what conditions should they be stored?
Well, gosh, I think we ran, the shelf life on those is, and that's why we do spikes and SRMs and all those things, so that, you would rerun those to verify that the validity of those associated samples. And the certified reference materials should try to match well, what the sample types are. So, and Jenny and I ran these, gosh, I think, while we did it, we got multiple samples and pulled them in. I would be confident to go back in the lab after a month or so and still analyze those samples, as long as they've been recapped. That's the other thing, if they've been sitting out for a while, there is some evaporation that can occur. So you might get some more concentrated results, but for the most part, the shelf life is a month at least. Would you agree, Sam?
Yeah. And Craig, we also, like I said, we take the samples as is with all that acid straight from the digestion, and we're not like further diluting it into another vial. So it's sitting in a pretty high acid concentration as well.
Right.
All right. Okay, well, another question. Gold is usually used in ICP-MS methods when the concentration of mercury is being determined. Was gold used during these validation procedures? Craig, you want to answer that?
I think that, yeah, sure. Gold was not used. And this has been, a question for a long period of time. Really, all you need is about what we used is 0.5% of HCl to stabilize the mercury. And if you look at, from way back when I first started running ICP-MS, that was sort of the thing that everybody thought you needed to use. Well, excuse me. One of the things about that gold standard that you're using to stabilize, it has HCl in it. So it's really the HCl. Mercury has to be in the zero oxidation state in order for that to work. So, and it comes in many, many different forms, depending on all these different samples that we're using. So gold is not required. And the other thing to that too is with metals analysis is if we're adding an additional reagent, then we have there's a possibility that you can add more contamination. So reducing that amount, getting rid of that, then you're going to have less problems with other things as well. So yeah, no, not required.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Craig. I think this next question is going to be for Sam. Is there data available demonstrating the efficiency of digestion using the Mars microwave for the various matrices shown on slides 8 through 11?
Hey, so yeah, there actually is. We digested a number of different NIST SRMs with our method, and the data is on the method. So yeah, all you got to do is look at the method itself, and you'll see the data for different recoveries of SRMs, as well as spike recoveries for blanks and samples. So a lot of different validation techniques were used for this method, and the data is in the method.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next question. If available, was the efficiency study performed using various concentrations of the analytes of interest? That's for Craig or Jenny.
So, yeah, those, and so we did, and that was, by the ERP from the AOAC. So samples were spiked at low, medium, and high levels. I don't remember the specific concentrations. So that covered all the bases. Plus, we did everything in triplicate. So those were to assure that, we could see the low levels and also quantitate the higher levels as well. So really covers all the bases as far as those differing type of concentration levels that you might see.
Okay. Yeah. So I just have a question for you guys. I don't know if you covered this at the beginning, and I apologize if I might have missed this. How long did this take you guys to validate and get this method going?
Oh, wow. That was, I'll take that one. Yeah. I think we responded to so there was a whole group. So the CAS group with the ERP, they were obviously spending a long time putting together their SMPR. So that was probably at least a half a year or more. And then when the call for methods was out, I believe that was the spring of 2 years ago. So like almost 2 years ago now. And that's when we responded to that and started interacting with the ERP to say, hey, yeah, we have a method. We would like to submit for that. Can we have a meeting and discuss what you're looking for? And so it's been about 2 years now, working back and forth with them. And we're still working on it because we're trying to get final action. So this is going to be a multi-year project to get a final action method through AOAC.
The final action, and even maybe through this process, because we see sometimes the levels of all these methods, it's kind of can be overwhelming for people to try to understand where they're where they're at. Do you involve lots of laboratories using this so they can all see where they're at with this method? I mean, have you involved how many other labs were involved?
Okay, so that's a really good question. So for the SMPR, we only have to do a single lab validation. So that just included our lab in Santa Clara, California. And just having one lab is a lot of work covering all the different requirements for repeatability and reproducibility for the ERP. So, but now that we're moving on to the next phase, so this multi-lab validation, which we're just about to get started now, that's where we're going to have to include other labs. So this is a good point to ask folks, if you are interested, if you have a cannabis lab and you're interested in joining our multi-lab validation, please reach out to any of the four of us and we can put you on our radar, because we're going to have to start soliciting for other labs to join our multi-lab validation. And I think that our goal is to have 12 labs. And what we're likely going to do is send out just some advice that we've received from AOAC and our ERP, that we'll probably send out a sample and do a check on the lab to make sure that they will qualify. And then we'll go with 12 labs from that, depending on the results.
Okay, well, good to know. Okay, unless there's anything else from the panelists, any questions you have for each other or want to discuss, that's all the questions we have for today. Jenny, if you want to click on the next slide real quick, I think I had a few more, just update everyone.
Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Okay, well, first, does anyone have anything else they want to add or any other questions from the panel?
Nope.
Okay. All right, great. Good. So I just want to let everyone know we do free monthly webinars, as you may already know. So join us for our next one still at the end of the month on a 17025 topic, which is pretty high interest, is reporting of the results. With Mike Kramer, that's March 31st. And then we also have a few coming up in April with another guest speaker from Morehouse Instruments for the calibration of forced instruments. So please take a look at our website and please register. Again, these are free and again, downloadable for you to review. at a later time if necessary. Okay. All right, next slide, just if we want to just hold it up for a second. Here is our contact information from everyone that was on the webinar today. So we do have emails there. If you can't, for some reason you missed this and you want to email me directly or email our chat there, that's fine. We can get you everyone's contact information. And that will wrap up our webinar for today. Again, I'd like to thank Agilent and CEM for joining us on this webinar. I always love to educate a new industry on new things coming about, and I will definitely be sharing this with our group of assessors who couldn't make it today as well. And I hope we can do future webinars with all of you again in the future. And everyone, I wish you a great rest of the week and a nice day. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.